Welcome to Leadership of Fools, the leading podcast for leadership conversations.
Welcome to the Leadership of Fools. This is the podcast that tries to shine a light on those conversations that don't always get the space they deserve. That's how I'm feeling about it right now, Colin. Speaking of Colin, it's Colin. He's the heart and soul of this podcast, and he's here again today. How you going, Colin?
Oh, I'm fantastic again. Thanks, Rick.
I'm always glad that you're here. I'd feel like I'd come on the wrong day if you weren't.
Absolutely.
So you've got a conversation for us to tackle today. What's wetting your whistle?
The topic we're going to cover today is getting the right stuff done. And I think it's code for there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this world right at the moment. And I'm really curious how CEOs, senior leaders, startups actually focus on the core task and make it happen.
I'm loving your lackadaisical approach to conversation starters, Colin. That's amazing. Getting stuff done. I like it. That's all we need. That's all we need to get
The
going.
right stuff.
Yeah, not just stuff.
No,
anyone
the
can
right
get
stuff.
done.
Yes.
How do you get the right stuff done?
That's right.
Good stuff. I'm going to warm up your brain a little bit before we get started, Colin. Let's throw a question at you. When have you achieved something that others thought you couldn't, or that you doubted yourself?
I suspect I raised this in season 1. I struggled in my life to back a trailer. It's one of the things my dad had taught me to do by actually just role modelling it.
Yep.
Just say, this is how you do it, son.
Yeah. Watch, I'll show you once.
That's right.
Well, that's it.
And maybe this was 6 years ago, I had a leadership program, and I was on workshop 1 of a 3-workshop program, same cohort of people. I ended up telling that story, and when we turned up to workshop 3, which was a residential, someone had brought their trailer along actually had challenged me during the lunchtime break to actually to face my demons.
Yeah.
And, thanks, Kate. Face my demons, and I actually succeeded without destroying his trailer, which was a great success. Mm-hmm. So it was outside of my comfort zone, and a moment I'm incredibly proud of.
Well done, Colin. Look, I've made a podcasting faux pas. I realised I've launched into I've given you a chance to tell an interesting anecdote without introducing the other two people, and I feel like they're itching to comment on your story, and yet they feel like, due to podcasting etiquette, they haven't been introduced, so they can't speak.
Oh, that's right.
I'm wanting to know how long I can keep this going. How long can I keep them just in awkward silence? Not much longer, because I like the sound of their voices. Joining us on the podcast today, it's Kate Temby.
Hi, great to be back.
Oh, there's that voice, you see? I missed it. I wish... Did you have anything you wanted to say about Colin's trailer antics?
Oh, I like he stepped up to the challenge.
That's right, thank you.
And rounding out the podcast today, it's Chris Carroll.
Hello, Rick. How's everyone? Thanks for inviting me back, Colin.
Pleasure.
Wasn't expecting it.
Delight for you to be back.
Very pleasant surprise.
He didn't want you back. It was just a wave of just listener support came your way.
I get that.
Colin had to change his whole mindset around you, Chris.
Rick, is it okay to revisit season 1? I'm just curious. So you did Sandpaper Gate?
I did do Sandpaper Gate. That was the week where Australia had its lowest point. Australian cricket had its lowest point.
Yes.
Interesting topic.
Yeah, it was. It was
fascinating. Really, really good.
The
spin-offs into business were really quite adjacent, weren't they?
Absolutely. And Kate, you did how many in season 1?
3.
3. Topics like...
Me too.
Me too. That was great.
On the bus.
On the bus. Yeah. Taking the bus into the arena. It was the Kate Temby juggernaut. She was the backbone of season 1, really.
And we did customer centricity as well.
And customer centricity.
Well, just to get you going in this podcast, Kate, same question. When have you achieved something that others thought you couldn't, or that you doubted yourself?
I think the one that springs to mind for me was actually work-related. When I moved to flexible working arrangements. So full-time, then I had 1 child and thought, well, this makes sense. I'll just work from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. and I'll have the afternoon, and that seems pretty obvious.
So simple on paper.
So simple on paper. It was a little bit more challenging to execute, but...
At 6 a.m. too, so it was
early.
And that suits you typically.
It also suited the job. I was in New York, and so we were on a trading desk, so the time worked. But I think the challenge there was actually convincing myself and executing it after I had campaigned for that structure, and I managed to keep clients happy, have a child, return to work after 6 months, and then actually do it again.
Flexible working hours is the backing the trailer of working life, really, isn't it? What about you, Chris? What have you achieved? When have you achieved something that others thought you couldn't, or that you doubted yourself?
Well, I had one answer, and then I heard Colin's trailer story, which reminded me of a horrendous experience I had of something that I thought I couldn't do, and turns out can't do.
So in many ways,
they
were right.
It was wakeboarding.
Wakeboarding.
Now, unfortunately for our listeners, they can't see me. Do we have a camera here? We don't.
We can get a camera out.
I don't have the physical stature that I think is optimal for wakeboarding.
You're thinking the low centre of gravity might be optimal for wakeboarding?
I'm thinking low centre of gravity. I'm thinking that if you're on a wakeboard, the wakeboard will still float.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably the other element.
So you've got more of the basketballer's physique, literally.
And the worst part, it was a gift that someone gave me. It was a voucher. And that person who gave me the gift sat in this speedboat as they watched me get yanked, have basically my arms pulled out of my sockets.
Yeah.
What felt like 23 consecutive times.
Had you done this person wrong?
You know what? On reflection, I suspect I must have.
Was this some sort of retribution disguised
horrendous.
as a gift?
So it probably doesn't answer the question, but
I like it. It's a
I
good
thought
story.
I
It's
was
a good
going
image.
to. I thought I was going to be bad at it.
Yeah.
It was worse than that.
Who at the table right now might have that body stature to succeed
At wakeboarding?
at wakeboarding?
Oh, I think Kate would have to be in the final.
Kate's the only one with the
Light
physical
and short.
strength.
Yeah, so no.
Sorry, the upper body
Yeah,
strength.
you got the strength. If I had to nominate one of us to go wakeboarding, it would definitely be Kate.
A bit like
I'll
Kate.
put it on my
To
Christmas list.
succeed at wakeboarding.
I had a couple of work things that I probably think that I didn't have the self-confidence to do things that played out well. Whether others doubted me or not, I don't think you ever really know. But no, it was wakeboarding that still sticks in my mind.
Still keeps you awake at night.
Absolutely.
Awake.
In fact, my palms right now.
Sweaty, just thinking about it. All right, Colin, it's over to you. Throw us into the deep end of this conversational pool.
Getting the right stuff done in an environment. So please add to this mix. In an environment of regulation, if anything, heavier regulation potentially. In an environment of movements, so where people are looking at not just business but at societal change. In an environment of globalization where there's so much data, like every organization is trying to become more data savvy, but they're also saturated at the same time. For you, Chris, and you, Kate, other things that could be a distraction, could be on people's minds.
So I think the other overlay in this is the multi-generational aspect. I don't think the multi-generational aspect in workforces is new. I do think the differences across generations now are probably a little bit more diverse. So when I was coming into business, and the frame of reference I had for great leadership is of a generation now versus people coming into business that are chalk and cheese. And so, as I sit in this, what I kind of see myself as straddling. I'm a modern leader, but probably with a small m, because my frame of reference, as I'm being pushed through this, is that I just think that the generation stuff takes in a bit of what you're saying, but it's just something that I'm really conscious about.
Has there been
these
a
days.
shift, do you think, from that whole... I get a sense in the olden days of business, it was the ends justify the means kind of mentality. There was less transparency, less scrutiny of governance and all of that. Whereas all of that seems to have picked up, the transparency and the need to not necessarily... The ends don't necessarily justify the means anymore. The way you get to the end result is just as important in many ways, or proving that you haven't blurred the lines.
Absolutely true. And the expectation that the emerging generations have on leadership is very different. Very much it was you'd follow their lead and you'd try and mimic and think that was enough. I think now people are looking for a range of different things from leadership that
The expectations are high and immense.
And that's not unfair.
No.
I think that's okay. Yeah. So, but you've just got to be aware of what the expectations are. Yeah. And a little bit what we spoke about in Sandpaper Gate is what's the best way that I can get a really good feel for culturally, for example, where the business is at, but what the business needs, either consciously or subconsciously.
I think
Okay.
if you unpack that, there's so many topics to
Yes.
cover off on today.
Yes.
And I think one thing that we're coming to in that shifting of generation is the skills that actually are coming to the table. First and foremost, you've got these expectations, but we have a new workforce coming, and how are they skilled in education? And I think the interesting thing that we are seeing this always on and the social media, but actually what does that translate to in the younger generation graduating, and what can they do? So there's enough research around showing that grit is the essence. Grit, persistence, and
Resilience,
is that something that is people are learning? Is that something that the older generation had? I'm not actually sure either, but what we do know today is that it's needed. And I think the other skill is concentration. I think that ability to be in a zone, and that learning that comes when you're in a zone of learning and concentration.
Got to find that flow state.
That flow state is not natural. It's interrupted, and I think those two.
Yes, it is interrupted.
Those two requirements are really, well, skills rather than requirements. If you have a new workforce coming and they don't have those two capabilities, then it's really interesting, even when you put on the expectations and the KPIs and the culture.
Yes.
Reconciling that is interesting. But the point is, if the new graduates don't have a skill of persistence, grit, and concentration, I think it's a real challenge that even if as outstanding leaders we're able to move the noise, to create a clear path about their contribution, very clear work requirements, they don't have the skills.
So in your world, in your mind at this stage, getting those fundamentals, addressing that at that fundamental level, the capability or the character traits that people possess in the workplace, no matter how skilled we are at prioritising, it won't necessarily pay off.
Well, I think then it needs to be recognised that this is a new, the current environment of social media, the world that we live in, you need those traits more than ever. And it may be something that actually corporates need to help train people in if they haven't got it through their schooling.
Yeah, and
so it's a trait that needs to be schooled. I'm on a couple of school boards, and the move to more personalised learning, this is what it's all about. But remember, this is in transition, and it's interesting. Chris, I'd ask you, when your new graduates turn up, how are they demonstrating those traits?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that education systems have really over-indexed on technical skill and technical build. And we're seeing now, when we talk about all these things and prioritising, is the emotional intelligence requirements. And, we've got a little bit of exposure to a school and the sort of the direction that they're trying to take in the education that can bring someone into the workforce that has a level of emotional intelligence that can meet a basic skill level. Because when you break it down, I wonder if for a lot of jobs that they're not that difficult to do. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but
Don't show them behind the curtain, Chris.
You are coached on the job. That's my point.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so the technical skills that you come out with education, I think the best thing that you can come out of education with is a proven ability to learn. I mean, that's it. Because usually
Curiosity.
the work that you start doing is light years away from the things you discussed 6 months ago or in your tutorial, because that's life. So if you've got this now, an emerging emotional intelligence with the things, Kate, you described, and I'd probably throw in resourcefulness, then I think you're well set. In terms of priorities, which you touched on, businesses, I think it's incumbent on businesses to be really clear what we're prioritising to. So what is that light on the hill? And because you can prioritise to anything as long as what that thing is super clear, right? And can be articulated top to bottom. So I think the leadership imperative is making sure that light on the hill is very well understood. It's got to make sense, right? And it has to be connected with sort of the core DNA of a business. But I think, how we prioritise, we've got a lot of different, pulls on our time, and we've got to snap back to something. And so I think the leadership agenda is making sure that the business always has that one thing that they can snap back to, because that helps remove noise. Because I think without that, you can be super easily distracted. and this is what social media and all these things, I think the people coming through now, they're just, I used to think about a couple of things, and again, oversimplifying growing up, but I see kids today, they just have a ton of stuff, a ton of stimulus, and this is all great. This is wonderful because I look forward to what it's going to produce in commerce in my world, but you've got to be able to, so why are we doing this?
Sorry, go Kate.
And I think the manager's skill underneath that light is how does it translate to each role that everyone is doing.
Absolutely true.
Because often that is the lost link. Yes. So, yes, we know as an organisation this is where we're all heading, where it's all clear. But worker 1, worker 2, worker 3, down the chain, do they actually know how they're contributing to that?
Message dilution. And
also how their distractions can be managed. Because in the matrix structure, whether it's compliance, whether it's legal, whether it's safety, there's a whole lot that comes on that worker 1, worker 2, worker agenda that they're not skilled to manage. So I think that's why that middle management skill of reducing the noise, clarity of contribution, and we can get to which KPIs, and it's a bit on to what you measure. Is it really what you measure is what you get? Well, we can talk about that. But the skills and the managers to do that, I think, is paramount.
Yeah, I guess part of getting the right stuff done is establishing what the right stuff is, because a lot of the problems that people face in terms of distraction is that you're actually a lot of the time distracted. You're involved in virtuous distraction, stuff that you're not distracted. You feel like you're accomplishing something, but you're actually being distracted from what you should be doing. You're doing something that you feel like is contributing to that, but it's actually not, because it's not established what is important. So you're actually distracted by something that can be seen as you're still moving forward when actually you're on a tangent.
Big traps I've seen in bigger business is everyone thinks that what they're doing is the most important thing for this organisation. Yep. And I've come across a few people, and I think the system itself kind of supports that. I think it fails, but it supports that, and it's such a trap.
It's a trap.
And getting that perspective and context where people, it's a bit the sporting analogy of great teams of great role players, and understanding that we really need you to play this role, and that right now, whether it's this product development or it's this health and safety or this compliance thing, is probably not the right thing right now. Important, get it. But in terms of bringing the orchestra together, we've got to get a greater cohesion. And so I've just seen in bigger businesses, just that if you ask 10 people what you're working on, and tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 how important you think it is for the business.
It's 10.
Everyone's 10ing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's hard.
Can we stick with this a little longer? Because Kate, what I heard you say is the middle management plays a vital role in that connection and because I can see that, the stepping over of each other.
They are the delicious meat in the corporate sandwich.
Well, and you're really teaching judgment. It's respect and judgment. So you've got the light, everyone's got a job to do, they think they know the connectivity, then the orchestra starts, the games begin, and real life starts. Because it's frenetic, distractions. So you need that middle person who is very close in coaching and helping those that are doing judge.
So if the light is being shined down from the top, then the middle management is like the prism that light filters through down to the lower levels.
Rick, you're on fire today.
And so so it's how that prism is. It's how they are set up.
That's like
to how that message.
You described diffraction.
That's exactly right. And so that message can come through magnified. If that middle management is set up right, it can come through magnified, or it can come through completely skewed and abstracted if that middle management prism is not calibrated correctly. Guys, I'm going to write a book.
You can write a book.
Yeah. A lot of static noise goes through that prism as well. A lot of static noise. So making sure that middle layer of management again is aligned is again where you sometimes see a bit of drift.
I have got excited about where we've got to on this topic right now. I know it's not the answer to everything.
No, we've solved it.
That's right. But it is my questions of things like being a role player, rewarding, again, apologies for another sporting metaphor, but rewarding the assist rather than the actual goal. Like, the moment where I actually make you look good, I set you up for success. And essentially, I think we're talking about a lot of humility an ability to not be the centre of attention. And I'm wondering how much that plays out in organisations.
Yeah, you got to be careful because leaderships often sense the tone, and they'll celebrate in business the pretty obvious and dumb KPIs. Like a dumb KPI is revenue. Yeah. Example, in a lot of business, what's our revenue doing? Which is, it's so flawed in a narrative in a business. I understand the broader commercial context that you need revenue and you need minimal costs and you need all those good healthy things. But if all you talk about is these big outcomes, all you'll ever talk about as a coach of a football team, for example, is that player kicking the 6 goals. And what does that leave 17 other players feeling like? And so leaders have got to understand what are the sort of the upstream pieces of gold that happen in business that we just need to broadcast and celebrate and connect dots for people who probably don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about what, I don't know, the finance and billing department do. I think I kind of know what they do, but
They do finance and billing. That's what I reckon.
Yeah, I don't know that they actually, how do they contribute, right? So I think that's important that you actually just call those things out.
Okay,
And
I
it's
see you nodding.
recognising the process. Revenue, assets raised, they're outcomes in my view.
Yes.
And you never, it's like studying, and it's the same analogy on the learning.
Yes.
It's actually the marks are an outcome.
Yes.
What is it that we want people to feel good about every day in what they've contributed in the process? And it's creating the guidance in that. I also think that comes back to the persistence too, because these are building businesses and running, they're long dated games. And so if all we're measuring is a 6-monthly or a 10-year revenue line, we've just said that a lot of this new generation are needing a zap faster.
Instantaneous.
Feedback. So how do we do this instantaneous feedback that's going to match with these longer term goals?
We can do it by celebrating inputs.
Yes.
Rather than outcomes.
Yes.
Because at this table we get the sense of it's a long game, the outcome game.
Yeah, it is a long game, and I think we've touched a little about this before, is just sort of the cycle of business. Yes. The cycle of business feels to me is getting shorter, about expectations and forecasts. And I'm just watching Elon Musk 2 days ago talk about privatising his business, and just the short sellers lost $1.1 billion in a tweet. So that's a pretty short cycle. In a tweet. I don't think he used the whole 140 characters either.
He didn't in 70.
What did he say? I think about making Tesla private, more details to come, or something like that, and the short sellers got whacked. But, how do you balance long-term and short-term objectives? And, how much do people think about long-term? And again, this generational stuff, I'm not sure they think that much about it. They don't think about 10-year careers at businesses. If they get 12 months, great. And then we'll pop my head back up and see what's out there and hop along. So a business in itself has a long-term, a going concern, we've got to do this. But a lot of the participants probably don't sign up to the same sort of duration of bigger, longer-term KPIs.
This is fascinating.
We all know that real value is created with some persistence. I'm not sure how you can affect your customer in 12 months. A little bit. But you're really not going to move a franchise in 12 months. And the value to have people who are at it longer than 12 months is just paramount. The switching cost of employees, etc. So it's easy to say, we'll just have this workforce that'll come in and out and in and out. But that will lose the essence of, actually they worked out what accounts was doing. And they actually made some relationships in that. And the connectivity and the relationship piece of building a workforce is lost if you've got this.
Yeah, you need a core culture. Because you lose so much knowledge through the cracks when you're churning and burning through staff that you don't even realise. You know what I mean?
True.
And so there is also the benefits of getting fresh energy in, but it's finding that balance. The whole thing with business is balance. That's what every conversation I have on this podcast, I feel like it's all about balance. I'm going to change the name of this podcast to The Leadership of Balance.
Okay, what's your experience with high performers, so top talent, and their levels of patience?
There's a high level of urgency. to achieve the next thing. And Holly Ramson, who many of you will know around the table, had a great analogy actually of how it's all back to video games and the next level. And I hadn't thought of that analogy. The idea that, on Fortnite, I've killed 3 people, I'm up to the next level, I'm on the next level. So I thought it was quite a good analogy, I think it comes back to managing expectations again and conversations to explain it with a little bit more complexity. That in fact, just because you've done 3 things and an outcome, the next level is actually not ready. You're not ready for the next level because there's part B and C and D in the current level. That if you don't stay in that current level long enough, you really won't explore it and you won't add the additional value to the business.
Oh, you need more hit points. Got to get more
So
XP.
so that's I think it's conversation of high performers. You all about wanting to broaden their skills, but it's not necessarily the next level.
No.
And you've got your talent acquisition people out there, and probably not necessarily their fault, but making promises. Come and join us. This is what we promise you. And the moment they join, you either disappoint them and they're going to leave anyway, or they're going to do something else.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for businesses. Certainly in some sectors where there's a war on talent. Yep. The talent. It's a buyer's market, and so the talent can really put pressure on businesses to say, well, listen, I don't think I'm getting what I need here, and I might just skip across. And so the businesses, and I'm kind of in this space a little bit now, is we're just over-indexing our EVP, our employee value proposition, as hard as we can, only because I think that is the only chance we have to create a real difference between ourselves and other like businesses. So how do I give someone the sense of growth or rapid growth, or I'm climbing that ladder, whilst also trying to maintain that they do more than one lap of the block? Because the value for the business, certainly, if you lead a business, is that I get real value from people who just know things to be true. You don't know things to be true after one lap of the block.
And I like your one lap of the block. That's what
You've done a lap of the block.
Part B, C, and D.
Ready. I've done a lap of the block, so where's the next level? Well, the value comes from your second lap.
Persistence.
Yeah, you've got to, with the video game analogy, you've got to recognise the difference between achievement unlocked and levelling up. A lot of people confuse the two.
I like it.
Like, just because you've unlocked 3 achievements doesn't mean you've leveled up. Often you can go around a level on a video game and unlock achievements quickly, but you're not going to level up until you've done the hard grind and got all the experience points that you need from that level to level up. But people confuse the two.
The other piece that I think in this is moving the conversation around what the organisation can do for the person, the high achiever, to what does the high achiever want to achieve. And then you put it in their first person. And if they start articulating, these are the skills that I would like to develop, or this is my path, you then are changing the conversation around what the laps mean. Instead of talking about laps, you then say, okay, I would like to extend my communication skills or my exposure to... So you're really designing roles as you go to ensure they're engaged.
Which maybe also means we need to absolutely go out of our way to reward the learning process and celebrating that even more. So, and here's the leverage points, things not only like video games, that analogy, but that analogy of agile learning loops. And, we actually saying we want you to try, we can accept you failing as long as you leverage the learning that comes from that. I just wonder whether... That's one thing I think we could put in the spotlight. And the other thing we perhaps need to put in the spotlight is to have a much more authentic and real conversation about the expectations. So maybe your EVP, I'm looking at you, Chris, right now, could stand out from the crowd because of not the unrealistic promises you could make, but the authentic, real commitment you could make.
Yeah, I completely agree. It needs to be real and very tangible. And so... a lot of people need to, I need to see it. I need to understand that. So, you just need to work really hard with that top talent to, yes, agree, we've got to have a broad conversation. And leadership is, we've been around the block. And I remember I was very impatient, super impatient.
No.
Yeah, as it turns out. So, and then it's only now I understand there's just some things you just got to go through.
Like wakeboarding.
But that's like, wait, yeah,
You just got to go through
that
it.
one. But that's a hard message to hear. It's a very rational and thoughtful message to deliver from someone who's got the experience. But that whole thing of what would you tell your younger self? I just say it's like, just slow down. It'll be okay, but just slow down. But there was just this, and I think that energy and that ambition and that impatience, I think, if channeled always appropriately, was a very good sort of fuel for
I still
my career.
give me that group of people. Give me the ambitious group of people
right.
every single time to lead. But that's the challenge for the leader to.
You'd rather
Harness.
channel enthusiasm than try to
is there a pulse?
get cut through ennui.
It's a
And
lot easier.
ambivalence.
A lot easier to work with someone who has a lot of drive. It's that. Yeah, it's a bit like you think about your talent pool, and you've got your top right hand boxes, and you think, well, what can we do for them? And then you've got the bottom left, and that's a very different discussion. But it's again that you can be really clear about that group. It's the big middle bit.
The 80%.
Who turn up.
Drive the organisation.
Are they doing enough? Is there much discretionary effort? Probably not. That's the group for me that I circle a lot, thinking about what sends them in one of the two camps. Because
And what's your view?
I'd love to move in one of the two camps.
What's your view?
On
What does unlock that value?
it's case by case, unfortunately, which goes out to personal motivations. That's
And
why
in the
I
end,
know-
you just-
Relationships and a manager. That's the power of managers to unlock. That's what they're paid for. That's what good managers are, to unlock some of that 80%.
And that's where
people don't leave businesses; they leave their leaders.
Yeah, and the push for strong culture is where you start to get, an increase from that 80%. If they feel like they're part of a strong culture, then naturally you're going to get an extra. You're always just trying to nudge those extra percents out of that 80%. Just that extra bit of enthusiasm and engagement, and that's where that push for a strong culture comes in, because that's where you can really affect that 80% to give more.
People love a checklist. If we had to make a checklist for 3 levels, one level is how should you educate yourself? Like, the younger self, the person finishing VCE today that has choices about what they next do before they enter a workforce in a serious way.
I think we can all agree that playing video games is the key.
It probably
from
is
what
the
we've
key.
discussed here today, you just got to play more and more video games and understand how they work. Come on, kids.
Shout out to my 16-year-old son. You're on the right track.
And if you didn't hear, that was a deep breath from me.
So let's stay there. I've got 3 questions
Yes.
to ask. Got 3 layers. So the first one is, what would we invite them to at least consider? Work on your resilience.
Grit, persistence, resilience. Secondly, work on finding your zone. Learning what it is like and what it feels like to be learning in the zone. So concentration. Removing distractions.
Right. The experiencing of genuine flow. Yep. And you used the word resourcefulness
I like
as well.
resourcefulness and adaptability. Right. I think it's in the way work is going. We've started with flexible, but I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think, flexible hours is one thing. We'll look back at flexible hours and be like, why did it take us so long to get flexible? Because there'll be flexible working at home, and you roll it forward. So I think that sort of adaptability and resourcefulness, because I think those folks who can bring what aren't natural clusters of things together will create wonderful things.
Yep.
Got to be
But
business
that's
MacGyvers.
that's exactly right. Yeah, MacGyvers.
So let me go to the other end of the scale. So you reach an executive CEO level, a board level, and we started to talk about the shining of the light. So what's the checklist around that? What are the fundamentals that those people need to be focused on?
In terms of the people who are there to create the light.
Well, I'm almost going back to the fundamental question: how can we get the right stuff done? Okay. So one of the things both of you said quite early in the piece is we risk, in fact, without clarity, without a picture of where we're going, at least some spotlight on the top of the hill, we're going to get lost pretty quickly. So what are we actually asking of those people? Kate?
I think it's twofold. One is create the direction, and it's not singular revenue-wise,
Yes.
assets raised. What are the 3 or 4 metrics that we're all shooting for?
I like that. And the reason I like that is it's not the obvious things, and it's not the obvious things that were 20 years ago. It's the lead indicators.
Yeah.
It's the hidden gems, hidden gold.
Yeah. And that will be supported by your mission.
Yes.
But your values are paramount.
Right.
And values aren't, to use the cliche, they're not the thing that sits on the wall. What are the norms? What are the cultural norms that are acceptable and not acceptable within an organisation? And that needs to start at the board level and the CEO level. And then how are they lived values and lived norms within the organisation? We'll get to that. But they're the two.
I think the businesses need to do a better job of calling out groups or individuals that aren't aligned to the values or the
Right.
norms of a business
Yep.
that are collaborative. That a lot of businesses have been willing to accept deviation because it's a hard conversation. And the other thing that leaders need to be able to do is walk towards the tension and say to someone, these things aren't acceptable. So I guarantee there are listeners to this who are living with a situation, a team member or a colleague, and they've just been circling an issue. Absolutely. It's the human condition. It's no one's fault because we don't like uncomfortable conversations. But if one person from this podcast can just have that uncomfortable conversation, obviously earlier than later, then I just think it just changes that trajectory of either the way they think about their work or their team thinks about the work or how those two teams might now start to collaborate. I just guarantee everyone's putting off a tough conversation at some point.
The third level, which I anticipate could be the trickiest to come up with a checklist for, is that middle management, middle leadership group. And I'm empathetic with that group in particular because they are often sandwiched in between.
But that's the part of the sandwich, mate.
That's
That,
right.
that middle part of the sandwich is where the sandwich is at. Without that, it's just 2 bits of bread.
It's
But even the saying middle management
Yes.
is a derogatory.
Yep.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
And to Kate's point, I feel
They
a lot
play
of
a
it right
vital
now.
role.
Just
So
incredible.
let's not undermine that role. I wonder whether we are articulating as clearly as we need to what that role actually is and what that role needs to be.
So
yeah,
that
okay.
role is like any role in an organisation. You are a doer and you are also a leader.
Yes.
And as a leader, you need to be coached. So I actually think it comes back to the CEO, the level above, whether it's CEO or how many reports, they need to be coaching that, whether middle management, I totally agree with you, it's not the right term, but what we're saying, those implementers of the vision and the strategy. So if they're not being coached, how are they going to then coach effectively worker 3, 4, 5? Right? So to me, it comes down to, I do have sympathy for that middle management, but the buck actually stops with the CEO and the board to make sure that there's enough coaching in for that middle management so they're equipped with the clarity but also the skills to then coach the next level down.
They sometimes fall in a bit of a crack because, you know, in business terms, there's love affairs with CEOs, and you read the Fin each day, and it's all about these leaders and what they've done. And then obviously most recently, this whole customer centricity. Then now there's a big love affair with front lines of big service delivery business.
Yes.
It's all about the front line. But who's talking about... Because a message from a leader to a front line will either get enhanced, accelerated, or it'll get diffracted and sprayed around.
Diluted.
At that level. Yes. And we don't... I think I'm guilty of this. I talk about the layer in our business being incredibly important, but I'm just reflecting now, I don't think that I've articulated well enough why.
And
Yes.
that it links to the topic of getting the right stuff done because they're in the detail with the people who, at the other level, that is getting the stuff. So if you don't have that, the ability there to coach on judgment, because that's what it's all about, right? You're just judging what's more important than the other thing. If they don't have the skills, then that's why it's all lost.
Exactly the part of the business where you get the greatest clash of priorities. Because leadership's really clear, because usually boards and CEOs, it's really these 5 things, and it's usually their pay's linked to it. And someone who's on the tools at the front line talking to customers, their remit's pretty tight.
Yeah, because they're responding. They're seeing the
and if
response.
they say something wrong to a customer that could end up in legal, that never happens. So they get trained on it exactly how we can do this robotic action, but it's...
The middle is most ambiguous, potentially. And you use that word judgment, and that's the right word. The reason it's ambiguous is I've said this so many times, but it's the cliche of choosing between right and right. That's the ground you're in. And there's all these other messaging coming out. We need to stand out from the crowd. Like, I can tell you how many organisations I go into. If I'm speaking to someone at that sort of middle level of an organisation, they're saying, "Colin, help us to create the brand of our team. Help my own personal brand as a leader. Help us to tell a stronger narrative." And at some level, I think that's a crying out for everyone else is standing out. How do I stand out too? Celebrating a role player just doesn't play out. Doesn't come into mind.
And therefore it comes back to the leader.
Yep.
His team or her team as CEO is that group.
Yes.
And how do you manage those personalities, those norms? What is rewarded and what is celebrated? What is tolerated? What isn't?
I was in a facilitating a workshop yesterday, and I was struck by one comment from quite a senior person in that room who said, "I think we've all lost sight of who we actually work for." She said, "When I go around our organisation, everyone says I'm the best at this. I'm the best at this. I've chosen this industry. I've chosen this career." And they've chosen their functional careers. And they've lost sight of who's actually allowing them to do that. Who's actually... so there's some fascinating things that are playing out.
That comes to the shared mindset.
Right.
So really what buy-in...
And whose role's that?
Well, what buy-in do I have on a shared mindset if I'm remunerated and I'm rewarded for my division, whether it's compliance, whether it's legal, whether it's production, whatever it is... Yeah. I don't have a shared mindset, and that's why likes of equity ownership, different shared KPIs or remuneration, the essence of you're trying to help that.
If you can have a success in isolation that's not linked into the bigger picture, then you're never going to buy into the bigger picture because you can just sit in your silo and be happy with what you've accomplished, I guess. And
this is the story of, again, a story we've shared in season 1 around the stand-up comedian versus the impro troupe.
That's right. Yes, being happy with being able to forge your own little nook and be happy treading in that water, or being involved in a team and contributing to other people's success and all of that. So and buy into team success as opposed to individual accomplishments, for sure.
And the thing I love about that narrative and that culture is I get celebrated when I'm invited back to join another team. So I get renowned even across the world as a brilliant team player. Not the best, funniest, I'm the best team player. I want to change this conversation ever so slightly and then maybe lift it back up to where we were, and find a way of actually grounding this or having something to take away. In this room I have people who others would look at and say, "You've been a success, you are a success, you've done amazing things. You've had a great career." How do we all get things done? I'm going to look at you first, Kate. Even something you just said before, I'm on 2 school boards. I know you've been on Survivor. I know you've been an international executive. You still are. I know you're involved in a startup. I know you mentor me, like in phone calls. So how do you... And you're a parent, and you're a wife, and you're a
I'm a
friend,
good wife, by the way.
And a good wife. And a
Podcast
expert. So how do you get the right stuff done?
For me, I never lack motivation. So I do have a love of learning. So I think that underpins I have a curiosity. So then what follows from that is focus. And I think in moving out of a corporate world where with Goldman's for 17 years, very clear majority of your life is that's sort of given to you. Going into an office, you're given that focus. So I found that quite straightforward. Moving outside of that into working with a startup in London where everyone's asleep when I'm awake, as well as building a portfolio of other things, that's when I'm really trying to hone the skills of the focus. One thing is I try to contribute to my main event, knowing what the main event is.
Right.
So, and the main event is the startup and that's the majority of my day. Because
Yes.
I think something is, you can have thinking time and all, but you've got to make sure you are contributing the majority of your time to one thing. To be very
so that
clear
would be
about
problematic if you end up spending more time doing other
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Okay.
Like a portfolio approach.
that. Yeah,
But there is a main event.
I know the main event.
Yep.
For me, I've got to know the main event and then working out how the other things fit in around the main event. Now, what you find is everything contributes to everything, and that's the interesting thing the older you get, right? Having this conversation and thinking about leadership, and Chris even said it, you were reflecting on yourself in this conversation. So you do find it all, but actually getting stuff done, it actually requires time. So the other secret is, as we all know, work takes work.
Yeah.
Reading takes reading time. Thinking takes thinking time. So acknowledging that you need to create blocks of time to do that. It doesn't just happen on the fly, not for me anyway. And then in that time of what is allocated, whether it's to affirmative investment management or whether it's to a podcast, being present in that time. I'm very good at that, and I think I've always been good at that, of putting in when I'm here, thinking about this is what I'm thinking about. But because I know I have an allocated amount of time to the other tasks in my diary in different times. So protective of time, I think, is the key for me.
Chris, a father, position as much as I know, a father, a husband, a CEO of a European-owned global business, a continued interest in things like sports, friendships, wakeboarding.
Not quite as impressive as Kate. When you, I know you were reaching.
my
Yeah,
best.
you would. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff. I'm happy to shoot my.
It's all right, we haven't got to me yet, Chris. You wait
That's
till you hear
okay. I feel
my bio.
here's a tough position because I think Kate really nailed the answer. So I'm going to fumble around it and probably just say focus. Another word that's sort of got a bad brand is discipline. And discipline is, it's so old-fashioned. Well, I'm sorry, but discipline's probably the old-fashioned version, probably the grittier version of focus. And I think discipline is very important. So all the things that Kate said, I'd endorse. I'd just amplify it, just personally, about discipline and effort, rewarding effort. We talk at home about effort with our daughter at school. It's just about your effort, and we'll worry about report cards later. It's just, do you tried as hard as you could? And we say that in careers, and when I look back at the things that I've done, it's just because usually liked it, really enjoyed it. To Kate's point about curiosity, but you just got to work hard. I'd love to be able to be a little bit more sophisticated about it and throw this incredible thing into all your listeners, and people know whether they're working hard or not. Yeah. They just know. Yeah. And people don't often like to say, I haven't, but I think when people put their head down on the pillow, they know, did I give it a real go today?
Yeah. And I think what underpins all of that is, are you doing what really interests you?
Yeah.
Now, interest mightn't be passion. I'm not sure we all have to sit and work in what is passionate, but is there something in what you are doing, might be at a very low level, that actually sparks your interest? Yes. Because that actually is an easy starting point. Because then you can go from that platform to put in your best effort.
I think another thing is what's very powerful I've found with impressive people has been their self-awareness. Is understanding what I like to do and what I don't like to do, understanding what I'm good at and what I'm really not good at, and hopefully the things that you don't like to do and you're not good at come together, so you can just avoid those. But the things that you like to do, hopefully you're good at it, and usually you are. And just being really clear on those mentally as well.
Rick Brown, host of Leadership of Fools, improviser, farmer, husband.
A farmer. I'm a farmer. No.
Father.
I play outdoor cricket.
I
I can solve the Rubik's Cube in under 5 minutes.
You're actually a bit of a Scrabble champion, is that?
No,
not
but
Scrabble?
maybe I should focus on that.
Crosswords?
Yeah, I like a crossword, but I'm not that great at it. But I like them.
Roller derby?
I watch roller derby for sure, and I've seemed to be successfully breeding a lot of future roller derby champions.
You're like a roller derby stud.
Yeah, that's what I am. I've got roller derby genes ready to pass on. What else, Colin? I can say several words in French and Italian and Dutch. You know, because I've been to all those countries, so I learnt just enough to say hello to people. I mean, that's almost multilingual in many ways. My bio is. I mean, we could go on for hours with my accomplishments, but that's enough for now. And as an improviser, as a performer, I think that probably it's no mystery. Resilience is key because you get knocked down a lot. Anyone who survives in the industry has had their fair share of setbacks.
Performing arts.
And yes,
auditions.
You need a tough skin. Yeah, you need to have a lot of people judging you to your face and telling you that you're not what they're looking for. You just need to be better. That's all you need to be. That's the feedback you get a lot. Just be better. So resilience is key. Persistence is key, and being open is huge. Being open to opportunities that come your way.
Great.
Being aware that. That there's more to learn, and that you need to be open to developing yourself in ways you weren't necessarily expecting, and being really dedicated to creating opportunities and not waiting for opportunities.
We might take a break. Come back and try and share what we think people could take away. Okay, you were just saying it's hard. It's bloody hard to be in those middle leadership type roles.
Yes, I think it is. You, as a graduate, that you're doing the job that you're told to do. It's all exciting. You mightn't have found the right place, but you're focused on the task at hand. If you're in leadership, you are creating the light. Senior leadership,
yep.
CEO, senior head of divisions, you are creating the light. You might be, helping reduce some of the noise, but your star, you are known. But if you're in the middle management, it is busy, and it's a bit, I was saying, like roller derby. How do you release yourself from the pack? So it's competitive, but really, have you got the skills to release yourself? You're accountable up, you're accountable down.
You've got to pivot.
But you're up in a range of angles. You're often taking direction from a range of senior people in a business, and then it comes down. You've got a team. How do I balance directionally what we've got to do with what the business has got to do with my direct leaders saying, but perhaps what their peer, who I'm a service provider to, and I've got to provide.
And you've often got probably the highest pressure financially.
Yes.
That age group often stepped into a mortgage. You've probably sleep deprived.
Life pressures.
You're probably sleep deprived because you probably have some young kids. Mm-hmm. You might be going through family issues. You roller skate, your training wheels are off, and you're doing real liff stuff as well at the back.
Yeah, and you're having to pivot between leadership and following, and there's this weird stigma attached to being middle management. Like, so you're dealing with the fact that there's no, you feel like you're not held in much esteem or high regard because of
and you're waiting to be cut.
Approach.
So what advice would we give to those people?
Stick at it. Just please stick at it.
But you said it, Kate. You said you need coaching, and I think, can I elaborate what I think the type of coaching you need? You need coaching that allows you the time and the clarity and the space to make good judgment calls. Because you said, and we put on the radar early on, all of this topic's about judgment. Judgment of priority. Where do we invest our efforts and resources? And if you can't see clearly because you are so busy and it's so complicated, and you're in the middle of the prism, then you're not going to be able to. In fact, I'm now picturing a refraction. You're actually seeing things not as they really are. Mm-hmm.
And I reflect back when I was in those roles and how did I get through it?
Yes.
I think I always had focus, discipline and focus. That's sort of, that wasn't really a developed skill.
And do you think you could see the longer game?
Yeah. But I think what helped me through it was having a leader who was open, transparent, and believed in me.
Took my answer.
And coached you through the storm. Like, okay, you have 5 priorities, but yes, you're on the right track, Kate. Or the coaching was the bit that helped me go, okay, I can see the journey and I can execute.
The importance of having a great leader, I just think, at that middle tier of a business will make or break people coming through an organisation.
So that's actually career advice as well. Like, actually be proactive. Don't spend too much time with someone who's not believing in you or not coaching you.
Find a great leader.
Find a great leader.
Just it makes what doesn't go away is the clash of priorities, is the effort and the thing, but it just makes life a lot easier, and you get a lot more support. And if you respect someone, taking their message down into your people, you say it with conviction, because you have that respect, and therefore you respect the message. Whereas you don't respect the person, you got to take that message down to the troops. The troops can see it. They really can. As good an actor as you might think you are, people know when you don't actually believe the message that you're delivering.
So the leaders are like the brains of the operation, but middle management's like the heart. They're pumping the message throughout the and they're keeping it functioning.
I reckon they get underfed and underwatered.
Yep.
Got to if their heart's not in it, then what are you going to do? If the heart's not in the heart, there's nothing there. It's a vacuum. We've cracked it. We've cracked it, mate.
We've cracked it.
We've covered maths. We've
You know,
covered
one thing
anatomy.
we didn't talk about, and I'm not asking us
refractions.
to open it up right now, but The Right Stuff was a wonderful movie.
Yeah.
Very American.
And yeah, it's quite a long film, but quite satisfying.
I just wanted to ask,
Yes.
what did you think we would cover and what was new? Like, just what was your... Expectation.
versus reality.
Do you know what I thought? I thought we would spend more time talking about perhaps the distractions themselves, which would have been not that helpful. Like,
We all know
would have
what
been
they are.
distracting.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we could have easily gone into how do you actually navigate through the political landscape, the social landscape, the regulatory. I can't even say the word. The regulation landscape, but instead we got to the heart of it. So I'm thrilled.
Okay.
Beautiful. So when you say we're wrapping it up, you're happy, like we're just closing off this podcast?
You're being very gentle with me, Rick.
Oh, just
Very courteous,
wanna make sure-
understanding,
He knows what
supportive.
middle management needs.
I just know structurally.
He's looking for the...
This is a nurturing moment.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Carroll, is there anything else you would like to offer?
No. I think it's true. I think even as we've discussed things, some things in my mind, little reminders for me of things that I can and should do more of. So I've personally found it rewarding to have the discussion.
Beautiful. What about you, Kate?
I think it's, again, emphasising the need for a great coaching and great support. And I think that comes back to how do you invest in your people? And what skills do they need?
I feel like we said about the expectations that people have on leadership. I think this is one of them. I think we've kind of talked around that point that says now people coming through, you've got to expect that the leader can do all these things for me. Now that we've landed on, it's that middle tier of the business that probably needs it more than any part of the business.
And when I'm speaking to so many people in doing their task at hand, the moment that they find a great coach, internal, external leader, that's the thing they tell you about, because it gives them permission to think. And how powerful is that? It's not the permission to say, oh, this is how you do your job. That's not what people relay to me. People relay, I had a moment I was supported to think.
What's a growth moment?
That's right.
I
Where are you
love
at,
these
Colin?
conversations. I love these conversations.
So happy.
I'm really happy.
You're a
Actually,
flutter.
in season 1, I learnt so much.
And season 2's just
season
following
2.
the trend. It's just reinforcing.
I know.
Yes.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
It's a great time to be
for
alive.
Pleasure. No,
being
great-
here today.
great to
Guys,
talk.
you've podcasting achievement unlocked. Well done. You've entertained
Next
me.
level?
No, you haven't leveled up yet. So don't get those two confused.
Level
You're on the
up, level.
verge. You're on the verge. So if you're out there listening, stay tuned. When these two reappear on the podcast, maybe they will level up. The tension is palpable. Thank you for joining Leadership of Fools.